The Raven by Edgar Allan Poe. As we read this, I'm going to break it down for you. Remember, when you're reading poetry, it's best to go at it as stanza by stanza, kind of dissect each stanza to see what that specific stanza is speaking about, what it's talking about. Remember this the time period in which this poem was written. There was no technology. They didn't have TV. They didn't have the things that we do now. And so it's important to keep that in mind as you go along reading and listening to better understand character choices as well as the decisions they make and all that good stuff. Once upon a midnight dreary, while I wandered weak and weary over a many quaint and curious volume of forgotten lore, while I nodded, nearly napping, suddenly there came a tapping, as of some gently rapping at my chamber door. "'Tis some visitor," I muttered, tapping at my chamber door. "Only this and nothing more." Okay, so we first have a little bit of our setting here. We know that it's midnight. He's obviously inside maybe his home. Now it says over a many quaint and curious volume of forgotten lore. Forgotten lore is going to be one. We can use context clues here to see he's going over a volume. Usually this would mean some type of novel or, when you have a series, they wouldn't have called it a series. They would have called it a volume, sort of like The Hunger Games or Twilight or something like that has a series. And forgotten lore means it's probably really old. He's reading some old stuff here. Remember, they didn't have TV. He's at home. He even says that he's nearly napping. He's falling asleep. A lot of times we might fall asleep watching TV and things like that. And this would have been just the same, only they're falling asleep while he's reading, our narrator. Distinctly I remember. It was in the bleak December, and such a separate dying ember wrought its ghost upon the floor. Eagerly I wished the morrow. Vainly I had sought to borrow from my books surcease of sorrow, sorrow from the lost Lenore, for the rare and radiant maiden who the angels named Lenore, nameless here forevermore. So now he's kind of remembering back. The tapping kind of woke him up, and he's reminiscing. And we often do that, when we're alone and we're just sitting there thinking, pondering to ourselves. And this is what he's doing. And he's thinking back to his lost Lenore. And we know that she's probably passed on because he says the angels named her Lenore, and he's kind of sitting there reminiscing, missing her, and thinking back to when she was there. And when he says he wished to borrow the morrow, that would mean tomorrow. He wished he had more days with her. And the silken, sad, uncertain rustling of each purple curtain thrilled me, filled me with fantastic terrors never felt before. So that now, to still the beating of my heart, I stood repeating, "'Tis some visitor entreating entrance at my chamber door. Some late visitor entreating entrance at my chamber door. This it is and nothing more." So again, he's getting a little scared. He hears that beating in his heart. That means, his heart's starting to race. He's getting a little scared now. Presently my soul grew stronger, hesitating then no longer. "Sir," said I, "or maiden, truly your forgiveness I implore. But the fact is I was napping, and so gently you came rapping, and so faintly you came tapping at my chamber door, that I scarce was I heard you. Here I opened wide the door. Darkness there and nothing more." So he heard that tapping again, and he got a little scared, right? And so he got a little, he said his soul grew stronger. That means he got a little bit brave, right? And he says, he's calling out to whoever's behind the door, and he says, "Sir or madam, your forgiveness I implore. I'm sorry, I was sleeping," is basically what he's saying here. But when he got up and he opened the door, there was no one there. There was nothing there but darkness. That's enough to scare someone, right? Deep into that darkness peering, long I stood there wandering, fearing, doubting, dreaming dreams no mortal had ever dared to dream before. But the silence was unbroken, and the stillness gave no token, and the only word there spoken was whispered, the word Lenore. This I whispered, and an echo murmured back the word Lenore. Merely this and nothing more. So he's kind of thinking maybe he's being haunted. He opened the door, and there was just still in darkness. So he asked, "Lenore," and then someone whispered back, "Lenore," or something. Back in the chamber turning, all my soul within me burning, soon again I heard a tapping somewhere louder than before. "Surely," said I, "surely that is something in my window lattice. Let me see then what what thereat is, and this mystery explore. Let my heart be still in a moment, and this mystery explore. 'Tis the wind and nothing more." So he thought something was on his window. He opened it, and the window was kind of tapping a little bit, but it was just the wind, he said. Open there I flung the shutter, when with many a flirt and flutter, in there stepped a stately raven of the saintly days of yore. Not the least absence made he, not a minute stopped or stayed he, but with mien of lord or lady perched above my chamber door, perched upon the bust of Pallas, just above my chamber door, perched and sat and nothing more. So when he opened the window again, a raven flew in. And when he says he has the mien of lord or lady, he means this raven came and sat kind of a lord or lady. He's referring back to the old days. That's what he means by the saintly days of yore. This is back to when there were knights and kings and queens and things. And he kind of sat. He came in and sat like he owned the place. And he just sat on his chamber door. And remember, a chamber is like a bedroom. And he sat on that doorway and just perched there or sat there and did nothing. Then this ebony bird beguiling my sad fancy into smiling, by the grave and stern decorum of the countenance it wore. "Though thy crest be shorn and shaven, thou," I said, "art sure no craven, ghastly grim and ancient ravering, wandering from the nightly shore. Tell me what thy lordly name is on the night's Plutonian shore." Quoth the raven, "Nevermore." So he says from the night's Plutonian shore, he means he's from hell. He's from somewhere dark. And he asks him, "What is your name?" And he says, "Nevermore." Much I marveled this ungainly fowl to hear discourse so plainly, though it answers little meaning, little relevance bore. For we cannot help agreeing that no living human being ever yet was blessed with seeing seeing bird above his chamber door, bird or beast upon the sculpted bust above the chamber door, with such a name as Nevermore. So he's marveling, and what does that mean? He's sitting there, kind of in awe at this bird, just sitting there and staring at him, very creepy, I can imagine. And he says, surely he's never heard of another human that's had to go through this. But the raven, sitting lonely on his placid bust, spoke only that one word, as if his soul in the one word he did outpour. Nothing farther than he uttered, not a feather than he fluttered, till I scarcely more than uttered, Other friends have flown before. On the morrow he will leave me, as my hopes have flown before. Then the bird said, nevermore. So, he's sitting here and he's thinking about what birds do. Other friends have flown before. He means there's been birds that stop by, there's animals that stop by, but they always leave. He hasn't had to worry very much. And he says, as my hopes have flown before. And he's then referring to, people that he loves that have died and gone on. The raven can't possibly always be there. And the bird says, nevermore. Startled at the stillness broken, my reply so aptly spoken, doubtless, said I, what it utters is only stock and store, caught from some unhappy master, whom unmerciful disaster followed fast and followed faster, till the songs one burden bore, till the dirge of his hope and the melancholy burden bore, nevermore. But the raven still beguiling all my fancy into smiling, straight I wheeled and cushioned seat in front of the bird and busted door. Then upon the velvet sinking, I betook myself to linking fancy into fancy and thinking, what is the minus bird of yore? What is his grim, ungainly, ghastly gaunt, and ominous bird of yore mean of croaking nevermore? We can see in these two stanzas that the bird is driving him crazy, as it I'm sure would most people. What it utters is only stock and store. So he's first thinking here in this stanza here, he's thinking, he's probably a smart bird. Someone's taught him to say nevermore. He's not here just to drive me crazy. But then he sits there and thinks more on it, and he's starting to think that this devil is coming from somewhere grim. Ominous means a bad sign, that maybe he's giving him a sign of something that evil. This I sat engaging and guessing, but no syllable expressing to the fowl whose fiery eyes now burn into my bosom's core. This and more I sat divining, with my head at ease reclining on the cushion's velvet lining that the lamplight gloated o'er, whose velvet violet lining in the lamplight gloated o'er, she shall press, nevermore. So he's sitting in his recliner and he's going a little crazy. He's starting to think about how that the lamplight's glaring into him, and he's thinking about that word nevermore. Then methought the air grew denser, perfumed from an unseen censer, swung by a seraphim whose footfalls tinkled at the tufted floor. Wretch, I cried, thy God hath sent thee, by these angels he hath lent thee respite, and repent thee from the memories of Lenore. Quaff this kind, repent thee and forget this lost Lenore. Quoth the raven, nevermore. Prophet, said I, thing of evil, prophet still, if bird or devil, whether tempest sent or whether tempest tossed thee here ashore, desolate yet ye undaunted, on the desert land enchanted, on the home by horror haunted, tell me truly, I implore, is there blame in Gilead? Tell me, I implore. Quoth the raven, nevermore. Implore means ask. And he's asking him, is there any medicinal, this is an allusion to something in the Bible, and he's asking, is there medicine to help me get over her? And he says, nevermore. Prophet, said I, thing of evil, prophet still, if bird or devil, by the heaven that bends above us, by the God we both adore, tell the soul with sorrow laden, if within the distant Aidenn it shall clasp a saint and maiden, whom the angels name Lenore. Clasp a rare and radiant maiden, whom the angels name Lenore. Quoth the raven, nevermore. Be that word or sign of parting, bird or friend, I shrieked upstarting, get thee back, thee tempest of the night's plutonium shore, leave no blank bloom as a token of that lie Thy soul hath spoken. Leave my loneliness unbroken. Quoth the bust above my door, take thee beak from out my heart, and take